The Roman gladiator and the concept of the ancient spectacle has received no shortage of scholarly attention, capturing the interest of the academic and the amateur alike. What words come to mind when you think of gladiators? Maybe death, killing, brutality. The image of the gladiator in a modern mind, owing to screen adaptations and the perpetuation of myths, is one of a fearsome, bloodthirsty killing machine, a pawn of the emperor with no rights or identity. These are often based on ancient elite depictions, with authors exclaiming their disgust at the perversity of the men and the spectacles. Observing domestic scenes of ruthless men towering over bodies or bloody battle scenes adorning public spaces. There needs to be a re-examination of material focused on evidence closer to the subjects and an analysis rather than a presentation. Gladiators were risking their lives, but not necessarily to the degree usually implied. Despite gladiators agreeing to be burned, bound, beaten and killed, they had more purpose than simply sacrificing themselves. They were vehicles to communicate Roman culture, embodying and projecting Roman values, with gladiatorial material such as armour being manipulated to convey messages through specifically chosen imagery. They were indoctrination devices. The gladiators themselves also utilised material to convey their own messages in chosen presentation, demonstrating the malleability, utility and power of visual material. There are some famous findings from Pompeii that have neglected to be sufficiently analysed, including the armour found at the new barracks and the graffiti from the old barracks. I will analyse how gladiators presented themselves inside and outside of the arena, drawing comparisons with representations produced by others to distinguish fact from fiction, the real man from the created persona. I'm not trying to prove how they perceive themselves or reveal their true thoughts and emotions, but rather how their presentation was utilised either by themselves or others to convey messages. Gladiators are closely linked with actors through their infamy, but I will demonstrate how this link is stronger than many appreciate. The barracks should be viewed as their rehearsal room. They then entered the amphitheatre in their armoured costume, beginning their performance on stage, some rehearsed, some improvised, and then further curated their persona backstage in the barracks through graffiti with co-stars, leaving autographs and reviews of their performance. We can understand how gladiators presented themselves or were presented by others to the masses and among colleagues to realign the focus on the gladiators themselves, illuminating the experience rather than the spectated show, comprehending that these were real people and to find the balance between reality and legend. The elite valued them as tools to juxtapose themselves against, constructing their own image of moral authority, but were equally distrusting of their liminal and transient social position. The spectacle served as a mirror to society, defining virtue and vice being a core component in political communication. Gladiators acted as examples of Rome's martial prowess and ethics, fighting and dying and with willing, inspiring admiration. The images in the mirror, however, tend to be products of the viewer. And this is important when understanding how the gladiator presented, either by his own choice or that of others. The gladiators occupy a confusing and paradoxical position in society due to the duality of Roman expectation. They simultaneously lacked and constructed honour, playing an essential part in the symbolic order. Actors, gladiators and prostitutes were utilised to the advantage of others and Rome itself, being made exemplar and paradigms of what was acceptable and thus unacceptable. We can understand it as the mask of infamia, the moralising influence of infamia and how it was a ductile concept. The mask serves to conceal who wear it while projecting the desired images to the spectators. Gladiators were glorified by audiences, garnering supportive fans, but were not wanted in the community in any other form. Tertullian encapsulates the ambivalent attitude, seeing Romans and their opinions of gladiators as inconsistent and fickle, in the same breath managing to glorify and diminish them. Elevation and glamour was given to debased men, and the public love whom they lower, demonstrating the transparency of the moralising quality gladiators had. Literary sources and elite representations often imply that gladiators were stripped of their personal identity and were denied the privilege of leaving their cultural traces. This model has led to the gladiators being seen as a homogeneous mob, completely defined by his profession, namely his weapons and his armour. But the gladiator transcended boundaries, fulfilling far more roles than simply combatant. I will be investigating the man beneath the helmet, how the gladiator appeared in public and presented themselves in private, and their wider importance to Roman society. The sponsoring of spectacle was about control, mastery over the captured and condemned, and it's important to analyse the symbolic use of gladiators. An appreciation of intentionality and the power of material culture is essential to understand how every finding can reveal new nuances in Roman society. The archaeological record of Pompeii provides crucial insight into the world of gladiators, offering a significant yielding of two areas related to gladiatorial presentation: armour and graffiti. So, playing the gladiator. Helmets, greaves, arm guards and retiari shoulder pieces were discovered in the exedra in the middle of the east end of the Quadriporticus at Pompeii. The majority of the items are intricately decorated with scenes of myth, society and nature. There is no doubt that Romans recognised the importance of images in their society and could interpret a plethora of messages. Art was used to help communicate multiple chosen narratives with associated context, usually selected or enforced by the emperor. The games themselves communicated the wealth and the strength of the Roman Empire and the ergotism of the upper echelons of society. There was a necessary and central pageantry framing the bloody entertainment in the arena. One needs to view the gladiator as a medium of creation and an important tool in visual culture. The armour was a costume, one to depict a frightening fighting machine, and a prop in artistic expression of ideology and communication of messages. Armour served a symbolic purpose as well as a practical one. Gladiators' visored helmets effaced individuality and encouraged emotional detachment from the man during combat, effectively anonymising and dehumanising the combatant, whilst still protecting the head and face from injuries. This further suggests the men were actors doing the job designed to fight but not to suffer, bleed and die in any kind of serious way. This was a performance. The Murmillo was the most heavily armoured gladiator, with the armour weighing up to 18 kilograms, upholding the image of a man designed to fight and withstand blows, whilst providing an extensive canvas for intricate symbols and imagery. The gladiators were meant to look imposing, so despite the immense weight of his armour seeming impractical, it was a fundamental aspect for forming the gladiator. They wear this armour and they are no longer the subjugated Roman man, they are the great gladiator. Some motifs and imagery have simple meanings and their appearance logical. Certain images require a more scrutinising eye. A symbol that is often taken at face value is the palm. Understandably, palms are nearly always interpreted as victory palms, but I believe a more diligent look is needed. A compelling interpretation that is usually neglected when discussing gladiatorial armour is the palm tree, signifying Judea. When Vespasian captured Jerusalem in 70 CE, a palm tree appeared on monuments and coins, specifically the Judea captor coins. Some scholars assert this message, meaning that Jews fought as gladiators, but this image was not a reflection of origin, but served as a shorthand reminder of the power of Rome. Through war comes peace, comes money to the empire, and therefore games and entertainment for the people. It would have been a topical cultural reference, with the palm tree being a contemporary image associated with victory under the Flavians. The Roman citizen would be able to mentally make these connections. The inclusion of this image on a Pompeian gladiator helmet would connect the city to the capital and the emperor, demonstrating a cultural integration, a connection to contemporary imperial ideology, elevating the status of the city and its inhabitants. A Murmillo helmet is also extremely reminiscent of these coins. Roman ideology and propagandistic sentiments can also be read in some of the more elaborate helmets. This Murmillo helmet is often exhibited as a fine piece of craftsmanship, but one needs to not only study the images but have an in-depth knowledge of the Aeneid to understand this. The Aeneid tells a story of a new kind of hero, a man who looks to destiny controlled by fates and the gods, similar to gladiatorial attitudes. Similar to the display of knowledge of Flavian culture and symbols, this displays knowledge of Roman art and literature and its importance to society. The poem is primarily about Trojans but contains much prehistory and praise of Rome. The connections of glory to gladiators is obvious, but what needs to be highlighted are the darker meanings. There is a tension between optimism and pessimism, with the public praising of Roman exploits and the private sympathy for human suffering. Book 2 features on the helmet and is one of the most dramatic and tragic books from the Aeneid. There is a dark section of the poem focused on fortune, anguish, death and destruction. Human dignity, however, is still prevalent, with glimpses of hope scattered throughout. These scenes are shown in exquisite detail, recounting the conquest of Troy by the Greeks and the flight of the Trojan hero Aeneas. The scenes on the cheek flaps show Sinon, King Priam. Sinon is a Greek who stayed near Troy in order to persuade the Trojans to take the horse into their city, but this character usually arouses a negative reaction. He is an actor full of falsified emotion, concealing the truth. Successful in his mission, he continues to live his life. The gladiator too is someone deceiving others by strategic moves in combat, and if successfully evades true pain, lives on and fights again, often living in a wealthier and more admired existence than many men. Representation of this character alludes to how the elite saw the gladiators, as traitors to their noble Roman roots, engaging in the lowest status of job. Priam, like his fellow Trojans, allows himself to be deceived by the Greek. In equating the gladiators to Sinon, we understand that no one is safe from their charm, or rather their deceit, and even the most powerful men, the emperor, being captivated by them. Skill at arms was an invaluable trait for Romans, which is one reason why opinions on gladiators were so conflicting. Gladiators represented many things the Romans hated, but many they praised. And by displaying courage and dexterity on the battlefield, Aeneas is elevated in the eyes of the audience, much like the shunned gladiator. One of the arguments for helmets being used solely as parade wear is due to their impractical extravagance, but extravagance was the very nature of the gladiatorial contests. The theory of utility primarily rests on two facts, one being that no elaborate helmets for the secutor, who is the usual opponent of the net-wielding retiarius, has been found. The secutor wears a smoother, rounded, more streamlined helmet, so the net does not get caught and rather slides straight off. If this elaborate armour was just parade wear, the secutor would have had the plain combat helmet and additionally an ornate parade helmet like every other type of gladiator. And another finding that compounds the theory that the elaborate helmets were worn in combat is that a patched helmet of a provocateur has been found. The helmet was patched in ancient times, suggesting a blow to the head, and furthermore, the patch itself has signs of damage. Graffiti is a powerful form of visual material, a method of communication free of societal restraints that normally prevent sharing of personal thought. Ancient graffiti were not just commentaries on a theme, but were part of the built landscape, signifying where people spent time, recording their social interactions, indicating an audience in the location. The graffiti in the gladiator barracks offers extraordinary but neglected evidence of life in the ludus, with excavations revealing more than 140 graffiti there. Each type of graffiti demonstrates the personal agency and a level of autonomy as deliberate actions communicating thought and feeling and presenting themselves in perpetuity, whether purposefully or not. Shame in their condition does not prevail, contrasting the literary sources. They are vocal about their lives, commanding recognition and remembrance. It is essential to understand that self-presentation is not self-perception. I've created a plan and I've numbered relevant columns in purple that I will discuss select graffiti from. Some of the most infamous graffiti to originate from Pompeii is on columns 6 and 7, documenting the womanizing prowess of gladiators. The heartthrob Calidus is documented 3 times on column 6, being said to make all the girls sigh and being the pride of the girls. On column 7, Cresces is also mentioned, once as Cresces the net fighter, doctor to the nighttime girls, the daytime girls, and all the others. In another instance, the 2 men are mentioned together. This conjures the image of men bantering and besting each other in their sexual endeavours, demonstrating the dialogue of graffiti, one attracting more. Scrutinising the spatial context, these columns are almost directly opposite the entrance. This blurs the boundaries of public and private, internal and external, as these inscriptions are inside the gladiator's residence but can be viewed by passers-by and anyone who enters. These men have chosen to present themselves as great seducers, adhering to the elite image of gladiators. But since it is by the boundary and visible to the public, I think they are playing the character of the gladiator as forged by the spectators, rather than revealing their true persona, playing into the negative publicity and publishing their name. They are cognizant of being used as tools and pawns of the emperor to communicate values and selected messages, and are utilising advertising in the same way, carefully investing into their self-presentation. Juvenal, in his Satire 6, comments on how women are erotically obsessed with stage performers and suggests that a woman would violate her chastity at the chance of bedding a gladiator, demonstrating the uneasiness men felt towards the social pariah. By using sexually provocative language and graffiti in the barracks, the gladiators are keeping their powerful, threatening position while they tantalise women and agonise men. Another example of graffiti situated between the public and private space is the Virgilian quote found in space V.5.A. Again, the gladiators are controlling their marginalised status, exercising agency and using the same devices to communicate. I would interpret these graffiti as the men demonstrating their knowledge of the arts and poetry, but also their ability to manipulate material. Just like the commissioner of the armour wanted to display his and wider Pompey's knowledge of culture and current events, this is the gladiators' display of the same sentiments visible to the public. Something worth noting is in the gladiatorial epigraphic presentation in the barracks is the lack of graphic and aggressive language. There seems to be a professionalism or humility. It is a celebration, not a glorification of the bloodshed or the violent actions. The gladiators presented themselves as successfully executing their job where the objective was to perform, not to kill. The pictorial graffiti found in the amphitheatre and surrounding areas, which has most likely been sketched by ordinary non-elite Romans, often do not depict death but rather combat, contrasting elite imaginings. Graffiti by someone occupying a subordinate position in societal hierarchy drew satisfaction from the performances of the members of the same class and condition and took care with their representations, preserving name and details. By paying this special attention, the non-elite population commemorated the integrity of the infamies and their performances in much the same way the gladiators did in the barracks through their lexical graffiti, celebrating their duty and honourable service. Spectacles, including games, were highly politicised, potent cultural performances in which some of the most important Roman values and achievements were celebrated, and the elite conveyed the power of themselves and also the empire. The difference between gladiator and actor is that actors were seen as the inversion of the soldier-citizen, the antithesis in Romanhood, whereas gladiators embodied Roman virtues. The Roman public disgraced the artist, in this case the gladiator, but glorified the art, the performance. The gladiators held a perplexing social position, but also in being infamies, but also intrinsically embedded within Roman culture. Their helmets connected them with foundational mythology and works of literature, and their graffiti not only reflected their declaration of identity, but their integration into wider Roman culture. The character traits of a gladiator laid out by Bill, the love of glory and gain, the urge to challenge themselves at arms, and a taste for killing, sadism, suicidal compulsion, and a morbid death wish, are not necessarily traits had by the gladiators themselves, but demanded of them. The investigation highlighted the gladiator's societal role as participant, performer, and cultural signifier. Dissection of the images on gladiatorial armour was needed, and a study of the graffiti illuminated the deliberate act of leaving their mark. The armour and graffiti amplified the presence of the gladiators beyond the confines of the arena in differing ways. The armour and its imagery were instruments of social control, projecting the empire's position in the world, whereas graffiti were instruments for the gladiators of social expression. This study deciphered the complex exchange between reality and perception, intended and actual messages, illustrating gladiator not as a legend and an inhumane destructive force, but as an individual, playing their given or chosen role in ancient society. This research ignites a new perspective of overlooked material culture, bridging the gap between the observed spectacle and the lived experience. exposing the man beneath the helmet and integrating humanity and history.